Today's video is extra special. I am really excited for you guys to see it. Today we're going to delve into the world of silver metal clay. So I had never heard of this before, but silver metal clay is a type of actual clay that you can shape into whatever you want, make like cute little pendants, rings, and you can fire it. And once you fire it, it actually turns into solid silver. So it's kind of like real life alchemy. As you know, I love being creative and making things. I love all forms of art, really. Any little craft I can get my hands on, I am usually, whoa, windy. I am usually a fan of. Recently, I was perusing the NC State Craft Center's website, and I saw that they had a silver metal clay jewelry making class. They have a 3-day workshop, so I decided to sign up, and yeah, that's what this video is going to be. We're going to go on a little journey to NC State to make some jewelry. So yeah, without further ado, please enjoy. Got done with my first day of the silver metal clay class, and that was really fun. I was really pleasantly surprised. It was a very small group, and the woman who's teaching the class, her name is Gail. She was a very lovely, sweet woman. She kind of explained to us what the silver metal clay was. She demonstrated, making a piece, and then explained all the different techniques that we could do. She has some different little stones that we can use in our pieces if we want, and some little eyelets and stuff if we want to make pendants or connect the pieces. So yeah, now I'm gonna head home and brainstorm what I want to make, because I'm currently I feel a little overwhelmed with all the possibility. A bunch of designs running through my head when I first started sketching. I knew I wanted to make 2 pieces at least, so one for me, one for Isaac. Valentine's Day is coming up, so I wanted to make Isaac a little pendant, something that, he could put on a chain. For Isaac's pendant, I had a few different ideas. The first one being I could create the logo for his company. I didn't end up going with that. I thought that was kind of stupid. I was just spitballing. My second idea was to create a Cuban link out of silver and then hang that on a chain. Isaac also likes to 3D print stuff, and he designs parts, and so I thought maybe I could take one of those designs, recreate it in silver, and hang that on a pendant. But I wasn't really loving any of these ideas, so I decided to ask Isaac what he thought. He came up with a really good idea, and I ended up going with that. He wanted to have a rose as the center of the pendant with thorns kind of going around it. So I sketched out a couple different designs here. The first one was just a rose, with a leaf and a rectangular pendant. The next one was a rose in a square. I ended up settling and going with the square design. I thought that it might look a little bit nicer hanging on a chain. My original plan was to try to make the vines for the rose twisted as the frame. I ended up finding out later on that was going to be a little too difficult, so I decided to make a frame and then just sort of syringe on some vines around the edges, twisting around the frame. For my pendant, I wanted to make something kind of ethereal, sort of fairy, magical, something organic with plants, moons, some sort of nature motif in it. I ended up settling on this design where I have like an angel number in the middle with 2 butterfly wings on either side with like O-rings in the butterfly wings so that you could hang it, and then maybe with a couple crystals on each side. A couple other ideas I had if I had time and leftover clay to be able to do it. I thought it would be really cool to make barbed wire, maybe by like rolling out a thin little piece of clay, twisting it around like a straw to hold the shape, and then letting it dry as like a little barbed wire. And then I just had some other simple ideas of like, you know, just a little heart with a crystal, like something I can make with a tiny amount of clay that's just left over pretty quick, pretty easy. Alright, so it is day 2 of the silver metal clay jewelry class. I just parked. I'm gonna go walk over to Tally Student Union and grab a little coffee and some breakfast, and then head over to the craft center. So yeah, see you guys there. So to get started, we're taking the clay out of its package. And I was pretty surprised by how heavy this was, but I guess I really shouldn't have been since this is silver. Next, we're taking a little bit of Burt's Bees hand balm and using that to grease the inside of this little rose-shaped mold, and then taking a little pinch of clay and pressing it into the mold. For the unused clay, anytime we're not using it, we're supposed to wrap it up in some plastic wrap, pop it in a little plastic container, and spritz it with some water to keep the humidity up. This just helps the clay to not dry out as quickly. Then we're gonna pop the clay out of its little mold, and make sure to also grease your surface, whatever you're working on, with a bit of that balm, just so that the clay doesn't stick to it. And now that the rose is constructed, we're gonna start working on the frame. So I used 4 playing cards on either side to help me roll out my clay. The playing cards just give you a standard thickness so that you always know how thick you're rolling your clay. 4 cards was recommended by the teacher, so that's what I went with. Then to create the square, I just greased this little cutting tool and cut out a square. Once my square was done, I used this little knife to cut out 2 rectangles from the square. This formed a sort of little frame that would allow me to place the rose on the center piece and still leave some open space so that you would be able to actually see through the final pendant. Peeling these little guys up was really satisfying. Now that my frame was created, I needed to attach the rose to the frame. To do that, this is very similar to regular pottery. You get a little bowl of slip, which is basically ground up silver metal paste, and you paint a little bit of it onto the frame and onto the rose, and then just plop the rose down onto the frame, secure it with some more paste. I also flipped it over and added more slip to the underside. While the rose for Isaac's pendant dried, I decided to start making the silicone mold for my butterfly wings. So I took this silicone mixture, it was 2 parts, and just mixed it up together, made a little ball, flattened it out slightly, and then took the butterfly stamp and pressed it into the silicone to create a different negative mold. And you can see the impression of the butterfly wings quite nicely. Next, I needed to make the numbers for my pendant. I found this rubber mat that had numbers in it, greased it up, and pressed some clay into the number 4. Then carefully, painstakingly cut out 3 number 4s. And once my number 4s were done, I scooped them up and used a little knife to add some detail. While the numbers for my pendant were drying, I went back to working on Isaac's pendant. I began creating a bail, which is the little piece that actually hangs from the chain. I cut out a thin strip of clay, wrapped it around this little needle tool, and used slip to attach the ends together, taking care to add lots of slip since this piece would need to be pretty sturdy. Then I got to work attaching the bail to the pendant, again using a lot of slip. Once I felt satisfied with Isaac's pendant, I set that to dry and then began working on creating the base plate for my angel number pendant. Once my little rectangle was created, I used slip to attach each of the 3 number 4s to the pendant, using a little paintbrush to dab them into place. Now, on to the tricky stuff. So they have these syringes of silver metal paste that you can use to syringe on fine little threads or details onto your piece. I thought this would be the perfect thing to use to create the little vines and thorns around Isaac's pendant. I used the syringe to carefully place these vines and a little needle tool to form them. And this is how the rose turned out at the end of day 2. And this is the 444 at the end of day 2. I think they're really starting to take shape and look good at this point, so I'm pretty excited. So I'm on my way home. That was my first full day of the silver metal clay jewelry making class. It was way more challenging than I thought it would be, and I was actually pretty surprised by that. I ran into definitely a few obstacles along the way. I started making the pendants for me and Isaac, but then when I went to go continue making my pendant, I started to realize that my clay was getting too dry. And so I talked to the teacher about it. It was kind of cracking whenever I tried to fold it, into a shape or put it into a mold. So the teacher was telling me that I needed to wait till tomorrow to do more so that I could try to rehydrate the clay just by spraying some water on it, putting it in some saran wrap and kind of rolling it out. So I did that for a long time. I sprayed a ton of water into my clay, and yeah, so now I just have to wait for tomorrow to see if the clay rehydrates so that I can finish my pendant. But yeah, it was super fun. I got to talk to a lot of the ladies that were there and get to know them, so that was nice. Yeah, this has been a fun challenge. I'm definitely glad that I signed up to do this, and I'm super stoked actually now to see how everything turns out. Isaac's pendant with the rose, at first I was getting a little worried because I was this is looking like a hot mess. This is not turning out how I thought it was gonna be. It was looking just like a bowl of spaghetti whenever I was trying to use the syringe to, get the vines and stuff on there. But, I started to take my time with it a little bit more and sit down. I didn't really film that process as much because I was okay, I need to focus. And I wanted it, I needed it up close to my face. So yeah, I took my time with that, and it's actually kind of turning out pretty nicely. I think it's gonna definitely end up looking a little more grungy, but I think that's kind of cool because this is supposed to be a man's pendant, so it needs to look a little more grungy, masculine kind of vibe. So yeah, and then mine's definitely a lot more simple, easier to make for sure. I just cut out a little rectangle and the numbers, and I'm gonna hopefully get to do the butterfly wings tomorrow. And my video cut out because I'm running out of storage. So I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. again for the second day, final day, third day technically. Okay, bye. Okay, I just parked. It's the final day. I have a lot I still need to get done, and I think I only have 3 or 4 hours of actual working time before I need to fire things and then be able, to still have some time to finish them. So I need to finish up the thorns and the rose on Isaac's pendant, which I think should be pretty quick. I've got most of it done, so I just need to finish that, and then I'm gonna let it dry, fire that, and then while that's going, I'm going to attempt to use my clay that's hopefully rehydrated enough to make the butterfly wings for my pendant. Then I need to put those on, attach the little O-ring things, and then put the little crystals in there. And once I've done that, then I should be done. If I have time, I would like to make a ring or something if I still have enough clay. So we'll see though, because I'm not sure if I'll actually have enough clay to do that, or if it's even rehydrated. I don't know if I'll be able to use it. But okay, let's go. Once I got back into the workshop, I immediately started working on Isaac's pendant. This is how it looked after I finished working on the thorns. The next step was to pop that baby in the kiln. So we placed the piece on this little block, supported it with some ceramic foam, and then set it up to cook. While Isaac's pendant was cooking, I went back to making my butterfly wings. Thankfully, my clay was rehydrated enough. I popped it into the mold I had made and began to cut out the butterfly wings. You can see as I'm starting to cut this that my clay is actually pretty wet here, but I'll take that over it being too dry because at least I can let it sit out a little bit, let it dry out. If it's too dry, it's just unusable. Once I got the wings completely cut out, I used a cutting tool to separate the halves from each other and carefully added the O-rings into each of the wings. There wasn't a ton of texture on the wings from the mold, so I decided to try to stamp each of the wings with the original butterfly stamp. After drying the wings out for a little bit, I decided to start sanding them down since they were pretty thick. Before this step, I forgot to show you guys, but I used a little needle tool to try to add some design back into the wings since there wasn't much there. Then I continued to file until I felt happy with the result. Here you can see the difference that filing makes. The left side has been completely filed, the right side isn't done. I also forgot to film this next step too, but here you can see that I attached the two wings to the base plate using some slip to build up the surface to make sure that there was a nice, thick, stable platform. Next, I needed to grind some holes into the pendant so that I could set the gemstones. I used a tiny little needle tool to do this. And with those holes created, we can now set the gemstones. So I took a tiny little dot of slip, picked up the gemstone carefully, and then plopped it onto the piece, using the end of a paintbrush to tap it in and some tweezers to adjust the tilt. Then I just repeated the same thing on the other side. These gemstones, by the way, are little light green cubic zirconia. They're meant to look like little peridot. To make sure that those gemstones were really secured in place, I used a syringe to syringe on a tiny little circle of clay around each gemstone. Then I used a tiny little paintbrush to smooth out the surface, and this silicone dotting tool to clean off the gemstone. And again, I repeated the same thing on the other side, using the syringe to make a little circle, using the paintbrush to blend in the clay, and the dotting tool to clean off the gemstone. And this is how she looked when she was all done. I think it is gorgeous. With my remaining clay, I decided to make another tiny pendant. So I found this little heart mold, greased it up, and made a little heart. I was looking through some of the gemstones that the instructor had, and she had this really beautiful heart-shaped green cubic zirconia, and so I wanted to make something using that. So I thought this cute little puffy heart pendant with the green stone in the center would be really nice. Once my heart was all cut out, I carefully used some tweezers to place that green stone in the center of the heart. Then I took another little silver O-ring and placed that into the top of the pendant. I forgot to film the next step, but I used a syringe to make a little heart-shaped outline around the edge of the stone, and I used a paintbrush to tap that in just to make sure that the stone was nice and secure. And this is how she looked when she was done. For my final creation, I decided to make a brick. Isaac requested a tiny little silver brick, and I didn't have much time left, so that's what we're doing. Once I created the little rectangle, I used a straw to punch out the 3 holes from the center of the brick. Then, one of my classmates had a fantastic idea.
Maybe you can smush it on your sandpaper for texture.
Genius. So that is what I did. I grabbed my little sandpaper block and squished this guy onto the sandpaper. It really worked super well. It created these tiny little dots and looked exactly like a real brick. Then I added an O-ring so that Isaac could wear this as a silly little pendant. And this is how the brick looked when he was done. Before firing my final pieces, I popped them on this little hot plate to make sure that they were totally bone dry before going in the kiln. I did this with my rose pendant too, but just didn't show you guys earlier. You want to make sure they're super dry. If there's any amount of moisture, it can potentially blow up in the kiln, and we don't want that. After making sure the pieces were super dry, we set them up on some ceramic foam and popped them in the kiln to cook. This is how the pieces look after firing. They look the same, but they are not fragile anymore. They are solid silver. This is how the pieces look after using a brass brush to brush the pieces and start bringing out that shine. And this is how the rose and angel number pendant look after tumbling. I only ended up having time to tumble these 2, but I think it actually served the brick well to not be tumbled, and the heart too. I just got done and I am so excited. Like, everything turned out so good. I'm like blown away. So I'm gonna go home and show Isaac his pendant, and yeah, I'm excited to see his reaction. Ta-da! I hope you guys enjoyed watching this whole process as much as I enjoyed making these pieces. I had a lot of fun doing this. I think this is the most fun thing I've done creatively in a really long time. Once I was done making the pendants though, I knew I wasn't quite done yet. I still needed to do a little more work to find somebody to make chains for these pieces. So for my 2 pieces, I ended up contacting a local jeweler. Her name was Stacy Phoebus of Juniper Bay Metals in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I worked with her to actually create the chains for these pieces, which is super cool. She made the whole process super easy. I essentially just emailed her my idea, sent her some pictures of the pieces, and she said yes, she could help me. I went to go visit Stacy. She's actually super close by to me, which was really nice. It was only like a 10 to 15 minute drive to get to her studio. And her studio is actually in her home. So she works out of a home studio in her garage, which I think is super cool. And Stacy was actually gracious enough to let me film her workspace to show you guys. I thought it was super cute and I wanted to show it off for Stacy. So this is what her studio looks like. It's this cute little cozy space. There was just like windows and sunlight streaming in when I first went to go visit, plants and art on the walls. She had some different display cases showing off her pieces that she's made. And yeah, her little benchtop workspace with all her tools. Everything was gorgeous. I loved her space, just being able to, get to go there and see the amount of time clearly that she has spent there cultivating this sort of work environment. When I went to her studio, she made it super simple to find and pick out a chain. We decided on just a simple small silver chain for the heart pendant, and then for the angel number pendant we decided on, I guess you would maybe call this more of a paperclip chain. It has some longer links in it, which I feel actually complement the sort of horizontal design of the pendant quite nicely. They're both around 16 inches. The heart one's a little bit shorter, but I actually love how that turned out because you can kind of layer the pieces together like how I'm wearing it now. And I think it makes a cute little stacked necklace. When I went to go visit, Stacy actually asked me if I wanted a clip of fire, to which I said yes. And so Stacy actually demonstrated soldering a little O-ring, how she would solder the O-rings in a chain. So she basically had a torch and then put the O-ring kind of in the fire and took a little piece of solder and just melted it, I guess, and placed it in the O-ring to sort of fill the gap and make it one solid piece, which was super cool to see. So thank you, Stacy, for letting me film. And not only did Stacy help me make the chains for these, I also asked her if she could clean off the stone a little bit for the heart pendant. When I had fired it, there was a little bit of silver left over on the actual stone, and so it was making it kind of dark and hard to see what color the stone was. And so Stacy, she basically took a little tool and was able just to scrape that silver off. And she said it actually cleaned up pretty easily, which is really nice. And you can actually see the green and the heart stone a lot more clearly now. So I think that's pretty cool. It just lets more light in and looks nicer overall. Yeah, so that was kind of how that whole process went. I'm super thankful for being able to have met Stacy, and it was really nice to find someone who was as excited to help me as I was to find that person and work with them. Yeah, if you're interested in supporting a local jeweler from the Raleigh, North Carolina area, feel free to reach out to Stacy. I'll put her website in the bio of this video. You can also follow her on Instagram at Juniper Bay Metals. Her jewelry is all really beautiful. The tagline for all her jewelry is "by hand with heart," which I think is perfect. I couldn't have found a more perfect person to work with, I think, for this video. So thank you so much, Stacy, for putting your heart into these designs and for helping me out. I had a lot of fun working with you, and thank you. For Isaac's pendant, we ended up deciding to just buy a chain. The type of chain that we decided on is called a cable chain. And I think it looks really cool with the pendant, since the pendant has some negative space in it, and with the cable chain you can really see the individual links. So when it's all together, it sort of complements the pendant and very nicely. I think it looks really nice. I am super happy with how everything turned out. Anyways, that's about all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Thank you for watching this far, if you made it this far. I am so thankful and grateful for everybody who watches, for all your support. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.